Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome back to the show. My name is Dan Hafner. I'm super excited for today's episode. I have two special guests. They're from the same company here, but they're joining us here. So it'll be a really interesting conversation. But before I dive into that, please subscribe. Please like the show. Please give us a follow wherever you're listening to this: YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, wherever the heck you're listening to this. We really appreciate any subscriptions, any reviews, any shares of this podcast. It's really, really helpful for the show. So today, I'm going to introduce to you my guests here, Alex and Jesse. You guys have probably heard me mention this. I talk about it in almost every episode because most of the people I meet on the show and have on the show are from PodMatch. And today I'm joined by the founders of PodMatch, the actual OGs. I brought them on. This has kind of been in the works for a while. And it's a very specific conversation I want to have with them because a lot of you guys who listen to the show, you're either looking to build software, you're interested in software, listening to, or maybe you're just in business, marketing, all these types of conversations together. And the real reason I want to talk to these guys is because they had started their PodMatch platform on a no-code tool, and it is now migrated into a custom-built, custom-coded solution. We've talked about this with other guests on the show. If you've listened to this before, if you haven't, go back and listen. There's a lot of episodes to choose from. But I want to talk to them about the advantages, the disadvantages. Should you use a no-code tool? Should you not? What's the process of moving this over? Because I think, again, there's so many. Everybody's situation is different. Every business is different. So hopefully we can glean some insight from these guys. So Alex, Jesse, welcome to the show, you guys. How you doing?
Hey, great. Thanks so much for having me. This is the first time I've been recording with Jesse, and this is Jesse's first. I'm not going to steal your thunder, Jesse. I'll let you talk about this being your first time on here, but I was like hesitant to even do I talk first or is Jesse? It's our first time doing this. We have no synergy among it, but Dan, I love what you're doing here, man. I'm a listener of your podcast, so I've subscribed. I will give you a review after the show. I'll go on there, leave an Apple podcast review because I have not done that part yet. But man, I love what you do here with Tech Bites, and sometimes you get more than you think you're going to get. Example I'll give real quick, I'll turn over to Jesse, is you had a guest on, I'm blanking on his name right now, but he has a house built in the 1400s.
Yeah.
And I'm like what a weird bonus. And you all talked about the sheep around his house and stuff. I'm like, what? This is a tech guy? Anyway, you're doing a phenomenal job, man. It's an honor to be here, and I'll turn it over to Jesse now.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks guys. Thanks Dan for having me on. This is actually my first podcast guesting opportunity. Alex basically rang me up and said, hey, I know you're busy between development stuff, but I think it really add value to this particular podcast, this audience. So I appreciate it if you jump on. So I'm just a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Yeah. And I get that. So I don't usually have two guests on either. So I'll try to direct questions to you guys. So I get that. So no, this is exciting. We pulled Jesse in for his very first podcast, guys. Look at that. When you do the work, you can figure some stuff out, All right. So let's go back to the beginning. So PodMatch. I know I've actually talked with Alex about kind of how he started this, and we have some older content on that and stuff. But I guess just give us all, again, I've talked about it and shared about it a lot. So maybe Alex, give us a 30-second overview. What is PodMatch? How did you kind of grow it and get it started?
Yeah, sure. So anyone who has not heard of PodMatch doesn't know what it is. It's more or less, and Jesse's the coding guy, so it's a lot more complex than I'll make it. But Jesse, you get to hear me in its rawest form, I guess. I compare it to something like a dating app, but instead of connecting people for dates, it connects them for podcast interviews. And that's kind of the simplest way I've been able to describe it. So if you are a podcast host and you're looking for a guest to talk about software development, it'll find you a guest who says, my experience, my life, what I talk about is software development. It'll match you together. And it's not just making that connection. It's making very high quality connections, but also removing all the friction and administration that happens after that. Because getting people to the point where we are today, this green room where we're recording for everybody, right, takes a lot of work. And so our idea was, can we also remove the friction that's involved? So we kind of estimate that it's about 14 emails slash messages back and forth and about 3 hours administration per booking that people are doing. And that's really our passion. Let's put the right people together faster and cut out the administration so that they can focus on just sharing the message. And from day one, that was really the idea behind it, Dan. And really, man, I just validated the idea by talking to podcasters. I was speaking at a really big podcasting conference, and I had over 100 people tell me the same thing. I'm having trouble with the guest booking process. Or people in that same room, I'd like to be a guest on podcasts. I don't even know where to begin, right? And so just removing the friction involved along the way for this whole process has been that's been the game since day one, and we're really happy to be doing that. And yeah, that's kind of what I'll share on that.
Yeah. And I remember we had talked about this before, was that you had actually originally started this idea like from a spreadsheet, right? Like before it was even like software, anything like that. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, for me, because I met a bunch of people at this conference that I was at. And so I was, to give everyone a little more context, about 2,000 people at this podcasting conference. And I was asking people what they were struggling with, because I believe that's what you do as an entrepreneur. You find out the problem so you can offer the solution, right? And so I was just writing down the names because I wanted to make sure that these people also became the first people that used what we came up with, right? But in that room, I realized that there was guests describing a host I just met. And so I found myself making real-time connections, but also going back home with an Excel spreadsheet saying, okay, this person said that they have a book about this. This person needed this, and just making quick introductions. And I didn't do a whole lot of that because I knew that wasn't the game I wanted to be in, but that validated the fact that, you know what, there is definitely something here. And that's when I called up Jesse, because past putting on whiteboards and Excel spreadsheets, that was as far as my knowledge and understanding could take things. But that's when I called a friend. Let's put it that way.
Okay, awesome. So speaking of Jesse, we got to get you. You can't just sit through your first podcast being quiet. So Jesse, did you actually build the app in Bubble like the first time? Were you the person that did that as well?
Yeah, so my background, Dan, believe it or not, I probably only had 65% of what was required to be a full stack developer. It's actually missing a lot of the front end technologies. I come from a very corporatized background, working for really, really big banks and
Okay.
DoD, stuff like that, and very familiarized with data analytics, more the back end type stuff. But I was missing a lot of the front end technologies. Um, and I didn't really want to take the time to go learn your top level JavaScript, CSS type stuff. I wanted to hit the ground running. So I searched for tool sets and came across Bubble about 2019. And Bubble, I think, was founded somewhere around 2014. And for the first 4 years or so, Bubble as a tool set really were cutting their teeth. They were making a lot of their, so to speak, early mistakes, really figuring out how to deliver what they wanted to deliver. So Alex and I kind of had the opportunity to join with Bubbles through more of their sophomoric rapid development years, which, to my opinion, kind of occurred between 2019 and about 2022, before their seed round. That was kind of their most, learning productionalized rigor and stuff like that. And oh shoot, we actually have clients that are standing up more larger scale apps. What do we do with those kind of years? So we kind of got to grow with them, so to speak. So yes, to answer your question, Dan, when we found it in 2019, I basically started fiddling around with it, so to speak, and getting it stood up rather quickly. In my experience, coming from, I think at that point, around 18 years of development, it took me about 2.5 months to learn it from top to bottom in order to start getting it to dance, so to speak, to start producing out very early alpha cuts.
Okay. That was my next question, was how long did it take you? So, okay. Very cool. Very cool. So what were, going back to that stage, so it's 2019, 2020, you're like working on standing up the PodMatch platform. What were like the advantages and the disadvantages maybe of using Bubble for getting that initial product stood up?
Yeah, so to answer that question, Dan, I'm really talking to two different people among your listenership right now. Your first set of listeners, they want to get something stood up quickly and hand it off to a developer, right? Like, they're not really interested in learning development.
Right.
They don't want to do that. They have an idea. I want to get it out there. I want to create some sort of working mock. And then if it takes off, if I get some investors and stuff like that, I can hire developers and they can build it from scratch again, right? For that, Bubble is an exceptional tool. One of the cons of Bubble is for some reason, they don't use any of the correct terminology, and hardly anything they do. They try to, quote unquote, I guess, dumb things down in terms of what they call things. So just know that if you're using Bubble, you're learning a lot of the wrong terms right out of the box for things like database objects, workflows, a lot of CSS classes, stuff like that. They don't use the right terms. So know that coming out of the gate, you won't be learning the correct terms, and that's okay for this first listener group. You don't really care to learn the correct terms. You just want to create a working model. Right. So for that, coming in, knowing absolutely nothing about development, you can probably expect to spend about 6 months in general, figuring out how to make this work correctly in a way that gives you at least an alpha working product. You're going to have to learn things like what's a database, what's a table. Luckily, Bubble does a decent job of letting you make a lot of mistakes and correct it, so to speak. So it's easy to reverse your mistakes, so to speak. Only rarely we run into a real brick wall where you've got to rebuild the whole thing from scratch. Right. So 6 months is your general time horizon in order to get a working product. Not a working product, but a working alpha that you can present, you can show to developers who might create, a conventional platform for you. You can generally expect that kind of time frame. You are going to have to put in a little work to figure out the interrelationships between front end and back end and databases. They do as good of a job as they can of making that seamless for you. So you don't have to figure it out. You don't have to figure out HTTP requests and all that, and parameter passing and session variables and all that stuff that you normally have to learn. Bubble does all that for you on the back end. Things like time zones and security authorization. You don't have to learn any of that, which would, out of the box, normally even take a conventional developer at least a week to get all that correctly instantiated before you can even start developing anything of meaningful value. So that's your first listenership. Now I want to talk to the second listenership who are like, I want to create a product, I want to own it, and I want to evolve with it over time. I may have some development background experience, or it'd be like me, I had half of what they needed, but needed time to learn the other half, but wanted a product working. So for that, Bubble will get you going relatively quickly. If you have like 5 years of development experience, maybe even just 3, you probably can get it, figure everything out in about 3 months, and really be able to take off from there. Also, the forum is pretty active. Be able to answer a lot of questions you may have about figuring out more specifics. Just know that if you hit an oh shoot moment where you create something that's well validated and actually gets traction and usership pretty quickly, you're going to hit a brick wall really fast with Bubble. Part of the reason on the back end is they don't support more complex joins between database tables effectively. So I always say, if you're developing to keep, so to speak, you're wanting to create something that you evolve, you need to get a conventional database backend as quickly as possible. I don't care what this is. You need to use a third-party solution. It needs to be a conventional DBMS. You need to get there quickly. You're going to hit a wall should you start to do anything complex, like, I don't know, build a scheduling app or build things that cross join and have filtration across multiple tables and stuff like that. If you're just pulling from single tables, look, Bubble does great with millions of records. They can pull in 0.1 seconds with a filter on a single table. As soon as you want to do any form of advanced bulk inserting or again, filtration, you're going to hit a wall really fast. So first thing out of the gate is get yourself a conventional DBMS, which Bubble plays with pretty effectively, and learn database technology, learn SQL, SQL, however you want to say it. You learn that as your first conventional tool set you're going to learn in addition with Bubble, and then kind of transition Bubble to being mainly functioning as your front end. I've talked to a lot of people on the Bubble forums, and this is how they matured as well into very large scale applications. Is first the DBMS has to be tackled.
Okay. Wow. That was super thorough and useful. Thank you. That's a lot of cool stuff to think about. Especially like you said, that oh shit moment of, because that's one of the most common questions that I get with people. Like one of the 2 most questions that I get with people when they come to me about no code is, can it scale? And like, do I own the app? Do I own the things? Right. And I know there's actually some more tools coming out there that, like even like Flutterflow. I think there's one called DraftBit where you can export the source code and you can do some things like that. So it's coming along, this whole world of being able to now, okay, I started something over here and now, oh, this thing actually blew up and we're doing something interesting. So let's go move it over here or do things like that. So it's an interesting tool. So I'll come back to you here in a second. Alex, I want to bring you in for at this phase, right? Now, having this tool built in Bubble back, I know it's not right now, but at this time, did it make any difference to you when it came to promoting it, when it came to growing it, when it came to getting subscribers and people signed up to it? Did it make any difference? Did it make it easier? Did it make it harder? Or did it not matter at all?
Initially, it made it much easier because we had something. Right. So it wasn't like 2 years of us trying to build something out and me telling that original group of 100 people, like, hang on, keep on hanging on. Right.
Yeah.
From if I remember correctly, and the dates do get fuzzy, but Jesse, I think I called you and I wrote the date down, so I should remember this. March 10th, 2020, and on June 15th, 2020 is when we launched into early alpha, beta, whatever we want to call it, like when we actually brought people on. So it was a fairly quick. So those people still were like, oh, I remember our conversation. It wasn't 2 years later, like, who the heck are you and what do you want? I stopped podcasting years ago, right? Like it wasn't that situation. And so at first it made it very easy because it was like, we just talked about it. Now we have it. And sure, we probably had typos everywhere. We don't even think we had a logo yet. Like we were missing all like some of the basics, but at the end of the day, we were trying to solve the problem. I will say this. Jesse kind of built it because he's like, how many people do you think will be on here? And Jesse, I don't remember the number I told you, but it was like a low number, maybe 1,000 or something like that. And like overnight, more people joined than we thought we'd get like in a month. And Jesse's like, bro, what are you doing? You're like, what did you do? And all I did was post on social media about it. And I had like no social following. I think that I wasn't as concerned because I didn't understand, but Jesse's like, this could break this going into like the tables and fields and stuff like that. Right. And so, yes, initially great, but it caused Jesse to now like right when we launched our product to start having to catch up already versus like stay proactive. It became, at least on my end, Jesse, that's how I felt. I felt like you were having to be a little bit reactive even from the start.
Yeah, to add to that, I was doing a lot of sweating, right? On the bubble forums, you're going to find two types of people. You're going to find the people who are literally using the tool in their first month, and it's like, how do I do this 101 type thing, right? That's a whole set of posts. The other type of posts are those who like, oh, shoot, I'm scaling, and now everything is breaking and everything is suffering, right? And knowing what kind of reading some more of the documentation on what bubble was, that they don't put out a whole lot of documentation what's under the hood now, but you can find some older documentation like from the mid 2010s teens of how they built it on the back end. I was realizing like, yeah, this is going to come into problems sooner rather than later, so we really wanted to get in front of it before it turned into a fire. And praise God, we were able to stay in front of that fire for years, basically constantly one step ahead of our growth scale in order to get implementations in that wouldn't cause our users any significant, pain. So yeah, we were always able to stay right in front of it, just anticipating the shortcomings and conventionally converting bit by bit our stack before it became an issue.
Yeah. Okay.
The only thing we had to sacrifice, by the way, is sleep for Jesse for 3 years. So just no sleep. He just worked 24/7 and it was fine, of course. Like, why not? So sorry, Dan, back to you.
No, that's all right. No, that's good. Okay. So now that's very interesting turning point there. So, and I guess this question could be for either one of you or maybe for both of you, but, at what point then what was the criteria when you guys, because I know I've shared about, you guys built another tool, which was called Podcast SOP. There's one, I think that's, what's the third one? It's Pod Reviews.
Pod Lottery.
Pod Lottery, that's what it is. Pod Lottery, yes. So you kind of have these multiple tools, and now you've kind of been able to merge them all into one and such. But so at what point when you guys had these oh shit moments, we're getting tons of things, Alex is going ham and just getting signups like it's his, he's just freaking awesome. So at what point, what was the criteria that you guys were like, okay, like this isn't going to be our long-term home, we need to transition this? What went into that?
Yeah, and I think I might have this, Alex. We kind of knew day one we weren't going to be on Bubble specifically, right from day one. Just analyzing what it was, how it delivers the solution. Bubble, essentially, you're not writing code, you're writing configuration. That's what you're doing. And then that configuration is piped through the internet, and basically the engine real-time renders your page. So if you actually ever look at your page source that's being produced by Bubble, you're not actually seeing conventional HTML and all that. You're actually seeing JavaScript rendering. That's what Bubble essentially is. So I knew that wouldn't scale long term for our needs. Additionally, due to my background, I will say I have a small trust issue that's been learned by experience. And the more that I have on-prem, the better. In other words, the more under our umbrella, the more that I can contract to developers we trust, the more that we can have influence and control over our own productionalized rigor, the better. Bubble being a startup company orientated towards startups, that's one of the cons, is that their productionalized rigor is lacking. It's especially for me, who is coming from big banks, DoD, stuff like that. There's an immense amount of productionalized rigor, sysadmins, and all the entire gamut is covered. Where Bubble is like, oh, we put a change in production and we didn't realize that would nuke half our user base. Hold on, we'll have that fixed in 10 hours. Well, that's fine for startups. That's not so great when you actually have a user base you care about and want to ensure that they have a stable experience, 99.9% SLA uptime. So we knew long term that we carry with a rigor with ourselves that we need to make sure that we implement. So we knew from day one, it wasn't really like, oh, we just crossed 5,000 users. Now's the time to do something. We kind of were evolving from day one. Basically, as soon as we were able internally to do a thing, even if our environment and usership wasn't really commensurate for that, we would still make the jump, so to speak.
Okay. So you knew from day one. And then I remember I was talking with Alex about this in the past, and he was kind of like, hey, we're actually transitioning this over. And that's kind of what started all of this too. So, okay. So, again, and coming from a user perspective, as someone who uses the platform, still uses the platform, and was, in it back when it was on Bubble and now still in it when it's on this, the transition seemed relatively smooth. I mean, you didn't lose any data. There was no like, oh crap, like, all my stuff got deleted. Where's all my bookings, all this other stuff. So walk me through that process. I mean, again, so coming at this from you're probably a lot more advanced than a lot of the listeners on this show. So, what was that process like? How long did it take? I know you were folding multiple products into one. Just kind of walk us through that process.
Sure. It's a slightly lengthy response, forgive me, but essentially we converted, so to speak. The term converted means coming from a bubble-based technology to a more conventional-based technology that you can host anywhere, so to speak, and it runs on any browser. That we did that segmented, so piece by piece, right? So I mentioned earlier on, you want to get your backend database converted into something conventional. It's sooner rather than later. That requires coding in Bubble to a more advanced level, simply because you're no longer using their native in-house database, which they've done a really good job of making it seamless and easy to learn. But as soon as you extract that to a level of abstraction of a conventional DBMS, you have to then code in special custom types, which takes a little bit more forethought. So really, you do want to use Bubble total natively, including its backend, your first cut. You don't want to just jump right into, okay, I'm going to learn SQL. No. You're going to start with Bubble, learn Bubble top to bottom, develop a working app, and then make the jump to a conventional DBMS. After that, you want to then start migrating out of Bubble's Bubble's internal S3 storage, which they use AWS on the back end. You want to stand up your own S3 storage. You want to learn how to code in the APIs required for that in order to, store S3 elements and reference them, have your own tracking tables in order to, do your house cleaning effectively for items that get deleted, et cetera, et cetera. So you want to work from the outside in, so to speak. So DBMS, S3, once you cover all the outside elements, then it's time to tackle the big dog, so to speak. For us, we pretty much all of 2023, we carved out as the complete conventional rebuild for PodMatch. That's where we really rebuilt the front end and the middle layer, the exchange between your server layer and the database. And we rebuilt that fully conventionally. There's no real easy way to do that. For anyone who's built something in Bubble, you're gonna have to basically rebuild everything. Because again, as I mentioned, Bubble is not code, it's configuration. There is no way for them to export code. They just simply can't. All they can do is export what's called an AST. It's basically a long running JSON file of all your configurations and teachings, air quotes, teaching Bubble what to do, what to render to create your site and how it works back at you. And that's not really usable by any conventional code set. You will have to recreate by hand. Now, Bubble can do some things to make it easier. They can, you've got what they call styles, which are really CSS classes. So you can convert those offhand to make your job a little bit easier. Their APIs, they do a good job of storing all of your API configurations. So it's really easy to recreate your APIs in whatever conventional stack you're doing. So you can take off bits and chunks bit by bit. When it comes to rebuilding the actual UI, what the user sees, what they click, how things behave, how it flows. You're going to have to recreate that from hand, from scratch. And for us, it took about 9 to 11 months, I believe, in order to do that. So that's kind of what our runway is in a nutshell.
Yeah, so that's quite a project, quite an undertaking, and I know you might have to go, so if you have to jump, that's no worries. But
and if I could, can I add something there real quick? I'm sorry, I just want to make sure that Jesse did a really great job on that, and that was like, I mean, imagine building an entire product and then rebuilding it. Like,
yeah.
It's just so much work. But at the end of the day, we said something that you say often, Dan. You talk about how technology is a people game ultimately. I've heard you say that a lot. And it's so true. At the end of the day, we were like, yeah, we're building technology. We're building it for people that we care about. And there could have been shortcuts. And Jesse and I talked about these shortcuts. It could have taken a lot less time if people just couldn't do this for a while or do that. But at the end of the day, when we sat down, our conviction was just too strong that we're here to actually serve these people. And so Jesse was willing to do the hard work. He rebuilt an entire product that we already built. And now it's built for the foreseeable future. And like you said, it felt seamless to most people. It's much faster now and stuff, right? But like, I just want to like mention, like, Jesse put in some work that I just think most people maybe wouldn't be willing to do. And it just has done very well by our members. I believe it's the primary reason we continue to grow is because people can see these people actually care about us. They're not just using us as quote unquote their users and seeing what they can do with us and stuff. No, we're there to really serve these people. So I just want to throw that out there. That's my 2 cents from a non-techie standpoint.
Yeah, no, good for you, man. I mean, that is a very good point. Like rebuilding something from scratch, that's an undertaking. That's for sure. That's not to be overlooked. So Jesse, like the unsung hero of PodMatch. Look at him go. You man.
Thanks, yo.
Very cool. So okay, so that's an interesting question though. So that's another thing that I run into a lot with people is it's like, okay, why in the world would I use no code if I know from day one, or if I know eventually I'm going to have to completely rebuild this thing? It doesn't make sense. Like it you know what I mean? And I run into that with a lot of people. So if from you guys' perspective, why would I even bother?
Yeah, no, I'll take it first, Alex, if you don't mind. And Dan, this will probably be my last question. Do you have anything you'd like to add to this question that I can cover? I'd be happy to.
Not that I can think of, but maybe something will come up.
Yeah, no problem. So I've kind of knocked on some of the cons about Bubble and no code, and I really want to make sure it's clear that we're thankful to Bubble because they helped us get our big break, so to speak. They allowed us to iterate quickly, to get stuff in front of a user base fast, get feedback from a user base quickly, and then iterate quickly again and have it back in front of them, changes right off the bat. I can't really express the reverberating effect when a member base feels like they're being listened to by developers. That can't be underscored enough. When you have users who are just trusting you with their time, they might not even be to a wallet point yet, getting out their wallet, so to speak, or a paywall or anything. They're just trusting you with their time. And then when they have a suggestion and they actually see it come to light in relatively quick time, that is the true glowing power of no code, in my opinion. The ability to quickly figure out what your app is, how it best serves users as quickly as possible until you've got something that is, I don't know, 50, 60, 70% to gold, and then making the jump to conventional. That to me is an ideal runway. So yes, I've said a lot of cons about Bubble, but one of the things that really help it shine is the ability to figure out who you are as an identity, as a product, as a platform, as a tool to your users, and your users figure you out, and how you treat them in terms of how quickly you iterate and evolve for their benefit. That to me is the shining glory of no code.
That's awesome. Yeah, I agree. You got anything to add, Alex?
I want to see if you had anything else for Jesse before he jumps off, but I could always add to probably anything. So on this topic, not on anything, but on this topic, I love this. So
no, that was very helpful. That was awesome, Jesse. So if you have to jump, that's no worries. I appreciate your time. First podcast, man. Good for you.
Come on. Thank you, Jesse.
You should do more. You should do more.
Yeah, it was good.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it, Dan. Thank you for the opportunity.
No problem,
Take care, guys.
man. All right.
Dan, to jump back in there, just to continue now that Jesse's going, I'll say this, like, for me, software is all about getting an MVP out as fast as humanly possible. Like, minimal viable product, just as fast as you possibly can. I have friends that are in their third year of developing products and they haven't put it in front of anybody yet. And what I found is no matter what you do, no matter how great it is, no matter how buttoned up it is, when you get it in front of people, you're going to figure out that things need to be tweaked and adjusted. And Jesse and I found that when we could do that really fast with a low cost, and we could, like he said, show people we can change things in real time for them, almost real time, right? It made it brought people in that were very loyal to what we were doing, which I appreciate so much. But also it gave us the chance to really flex out what it was. I'm not like, dude, this took us 6 months and no one wants it. No, it took us 2 weeks and people didn't receive it well. So we tweaked it and adjusted it. So that to me, again, the real power of no code. And obviously any developer, traditional developer like Jesse is going to say, hey, here's like the negatives, right? Like, because they're looking out for their people. But I'm glad he highlighted the positive as well, which is you can do things really fast, really affordably. It's a great thing to do. And if you have a very simplistic product, maybe it's a good thing forever even. But I think if anything we build hits a certain threshold, it's time to move it to your own thing. So that's my add-on thought there.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So you guys have never taken on outside funding, correct?
Correct. Yeah. No.
Completely self-funded.
Yeah, we when we launched, the day I called him, the next day, so that was again March 10th, 2020. The next day, we've known each other for a long time, Jesse and I, but like we're smart, I like to think. So we still had a lawyer draft up 50-50 documentation. We each put $2,500 into the account. So we launched as 50-50 partners with $5,000 in that account. We never had to add to it, which I'm very thankful for. And we've never gone after funding or necessarily even needed to. Granted, I will say this is more of a lifestyle type business, although it does serve a lot of people. But we like being involved in it. I'm not hiring out a team of people that are my frontline communication. If you message Alex anywhere, email Alex anywhere, you get Alex, right? Occasionally Alicia, my wife, if I'm like just absolutely slammed or on a podcast like this, right? But yeah, so we just decided, hey, we're going to do this with no working capital to keep it truly a company that we enjoy working in, that we can serve the people we want to serve.
Yeah, so even as you guys started this and have now transitioned it to your own custom thing, you've still done it with this minimal team.
Yeah. Yeah, me, Jesse, and Alicia, and we have some part-time content people. So we have a copywriter, a podcast editor, and a video editor, and each of them work about 10 hours a month total.
Look at that, guys. I mean, like, there's so many cool stories. Like, we've heard stories about, people that use Bubble that go get millions in funding. And like, you can certainly do that. Like that is an actual thing. You can check out, there's a really cool community I'm a part of called We Are No Code, where they share all these different stories and all this cool stuff. And then there's, like you said, there's people that literally build this and then have their platform in there forever. And that's just because it's a more of a simplistic app. It's maybe it doesn't really scale at that level, or maybe it's internal tools, so that's really cool. So you guys really don't have any plans to grow, PodMatch to like take over the world and have multiple offices everywhere and different things like that, right?
Yeah, we don't. And what you just said is so important. Like, someone else has raised millions of dollars to build something in Bubble, and that's perfectly fine. And Bubble works really great for a lot. Like, we loved it. It was like it was like a bittersweet day the day we turned it off, right? Like, but it was one of those things. It helped us get to where we are, and we'll always remember that in a positive light. And for some people, they may never have to make that transition, but raising millions of dollars or not, like it really depends ultimately on what you want. The beauty of technology, of software, there really is no right or wrong way to do it. Serve people, right? I think we all believe that, right? But beyond that, how you decide to deliver that is fine. And for us, we don't see ourselves. We work remote. Jesse lives in a different state than I live in, right? And like we're fine with that, and we really, again, enjoy it. It provides a lifestyle that we like and gives us the opportunity to support the people in our lives that we love and care about, and it's fun. So yes, we're going to continue to grow. We definitely have. That's my job, right? I couldn't answer any of those questions you had Jesse answer, but I can talk about the growth of it. But I'm doing so organically. We're not running ads. It's just a fun way for us to be able to build relationships and grow, because that really seems to bring more of the same type of people. And that's what we want, a very much so aligned, collaborative community of people. And that's what we've done with this.
Yeah. And I remember at the time we're recording this, I mean, I think it was like last month or something, you had, or even recently within the last couple of weeks, you had posted something about like you had the most like user signups or the most messages or bookings that actually happened on the platform, like ever. And it's all organic. So just it was one of those things, or maybe both of them. I don't know.
It was actually all three of those things.
All three of them. Okay,
yeah, we broke every when I posted that, we had just gone through a month where almost day after day we broke every single record that we had the previous day. So it was just like this hyper growth out of nowhere. And like, truth be told, I wish I could tell you, oh, this is what we did. I don't know what we did. It's just people that see that they can trust us and what we're serving, and they were just willing to share it at the end of the day.
Wow. Wow. I mean, that's funny. You talk to any like high level marketer and they'll be like, you don't know what you did?
I
Like
know.
that's like the cardinal sin. You need to know what you did. But like that's crazy, man. That's so oh man, that's so cool. That's wow, geez. That's awesome. Um so yeah, okay. So actually another random question that just popped into my brain. It's not really with the flow of this, and we'll get back to this other stuff, but um so like when you were in Bubble, like there were like workflows and there would be emails that fire out and different things like that. Um did you guys have any other like technology tools like Zapier or email servers that were tied in with that? As like a technology stack? Maybe this was better for Jesse, but I'm sure you kind of know.
Definitely better for Jesse. He would have a longer answer. Let's put it that way. But I know that we used Constant Contact is like our email client.
Okay.
So it would go like from Bubble to that, and how we didn't use Zapier at all. So like it was all like things that had some sort of hook, and that's another beauty of Bubble is it has a lot of things that are already like the connection's already been made. So it's just a matter of enabling it, which is something that I recommend looking for. Zapier is great. We use it for some things, but like I'm always worried that like if you have to have three different softwares doing something instead of one or two, like the more you add, the more complicated it gets and more things can break, right? So we just try to make it like direct from this to that. So we used Bubble a lot. We use Treasure It is the name of it, and that like kind of keeps the secret information safe, right? The stuff that like we shouldn't even know. It kind of keeps it all organized. And we use Stripe because we certainly never want to know anyone's credit card information at all, right? Like we don't want any part of that. So Stripe was another connection, and those were kind of like, if you will, the big three at that time. And then there was a bunch of, again, Bubble has some of the, there's things that would have taken Jesse. He told me all the time, he's like, dude, this would take me 2 weeks to develop, but Bubble has an add-on for this, like a plugin for this, right? So we were using a lot of their built-in stuff, which again, just gets you there much faster. And it's like, man, especially if like we were 50-50 partners, but if I was paying him, I don't want to pay the guy $5,000 for something he can click a button and it's there, right? So that's kind of how we did that with the tech stuff, if you will.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, I mean that's one of the things I don't think a lot of people realize is that it's so fast. Like there's tons of templates that you can get started with. There's just so many different extensions and different things that are available, which helps you go faster. So, all right, so you kind of are at this place now where you own the platform. Like you can take this and go anywhere and do anything that you want to do with it. So what is next for PodMatch? Like where are you guys going with this thing?
Yeah. Well, two things. I'll mention like one thing that's kind of always on my mind that more so recently, I just find that a lot of people that jump into the software game, like either they do really well for a little bit, decide they don't want to, and they sell it or they sunset it, right? And we're seeing that more and more, tools consolidating or being sunset and shut down. And with seeing more of that happen, it concerns me a little bit. Like we use all like what I think are very like tested and tried like tool sets, even that we use in PodMatch, but we're always bringing more and more in-house. Example, we even use Slack. We're talking about just quickly developing our own version of not Slack, right? Without all the, just for the communication back and forth, bring it internal because we would hate to see that stuff get lost. And recently Slack had some issue where some stuff did get lost. And it's like, man, we want to bring more things into our control so we can make sure that we can serve our members well, right? We don't want to rely on anything that might not be there tomorrow. Like we want to be that like true tested software that people can log in and know this is always going to be here. So for us, like we don't have the idea of selling, of bringing in other companies with us or anything like that. It's ideally just getting better at serving the people with the problems that they have that are already trusting us with their time and wallets. And one way we've done that is like you mentioned, we had multiple different pieces of software. Podcast SOP was brought into PodMatch, now called Workflows. The next one's that Pod Lottery one. We're bringing that inside of it, and I think we're going to call it Swaps. I haven't run that by Jesse yet, so you're the first one to hear that. But like I think that's what we're going to call it. It'd be like review swaps among podcasters. But the whole idea is let's bring it all under one roof because my focus for this year, because we have like 5 or 6 different websites and they all kind of support each other, is to bring it all under the PodMatch roof. So you have one login, one bill, and that's everything that you expect to get from us while we're continuing to get better at serving and solving the problem that people have. That was a very long-winded answer, but I hope that makes sense.
No, that's all right, man. This is the beauty of long form content is you can give long
True.
answers.
Love podcasting. I'm by the way, I am such a fan of podcasts. And dude, I already said you have a really good show, man. So great work on what you're doing here.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Appreciate that. Um, Oh yeah. So I always like to ask this question for people. So just drawing on your years of experience with doing this, with walking out this whole process, if you could go back, early 2018, 2019, Alex, and knowing what you know now, would you warn younger Alex about, like, what was the biggest challenge you faced, whether it was technical, whether it was mindset, whether it was whatever, what's one landmine or obstacle or whatever mistake that you would warn young Alex about, and it is as it applies to building this product?
Yeah, I mean, if it won this product, I say don't date that girl. That'd be one of them. Maybe a few of those. But regarding the product, man, can I give two? They're very different. But is that all right? I mean, it'd be weird for you to say no at this point. I'm sorry to put you on the spot like that. One I'd say is develop thicker skin almost immediately. Yes, we feel like what we're building is our baby, but someone is going to be really, really rude about it immediately, and that will just continue every day forever. That someone's just going to be a total jerk about it. And I always remind myself of this now. And I had a hard I used to lose sleep over that. People are like, this thing is stupid, it sucks, no one would ever buy this or use this, right? Like, heard it every day. And it would I was stressed, I was like not able to sleep. It really hurt. I'm like, man, are we putting everything into this and people hate it? It just takes that one person to ruin a day, right? But for me, it's like, okay, go back and develop thicker skin. And remember, hurting people hurt people often has nothing to do with your product, your service. It's something internal to them. And so internally, we say that hurting people hurt people. And our job is to love people that have been hurting. And so we just respond with love and grace all the time. So I would tell younger Alex that develop that faster, knowing it's really not a reflection of what you're doing here. When you can sleep at night knowing you are doing everything you can to serve people, just remember that's someone that's hurting, and you get the opportunity to show them love, not to convert them to a customer, right? But just to show them that, hey, you know what? I'm sorry this isn't for you, but thank you so much for letting me know, and just let that slide off. That's thing number one. Number two, more on the product side. Solve simple problems for simple people. I tend to overcomplicate things, man. I like, when I start getting a whiteboard, I'm like super creative, and I'll be real. Most of my ideas are absolute garbage. They're just terrible. I'm not trying to sell myself short, but like, I make things so complex sometimes. And I had Jesse developing some of these things that people didn't want. I was like, oh man, someone could do this. And it was a complex problem for a complex person. Complex people are very hard to make happy, right? So we'd rather serve somebody that says, hey, yeah, if you can connect me to a guest and host and make it load faster, I'd be happy. That's a simple problem for a simple person. And so for me, if I go back to day one, I'd be like, Alex, stop coming up with these big ideas that only one person on the planet would ever even care about, and they're going to hate it anyway because they're so complicated, right? And just keep on solving the simple things and check those things off one at a time. If we would be much further along if I did not misdirect the roadmap, let's put it that way. And the reason I was doing that was because I thought I was getting into bigger and better problems, but the reality is they weren't actually supporting people.
So develop thicker skin and solve simple problems. I love it, man. That's really, really interesting. It's funny because I even find myself doing that at times. But I see this a lot with people as well too. Is like we all, and I think it's an entrepreneurial thing. It's a creative thing. There's always this part of some people that's like, it just like you solve world hunger, you solve the way to land on Mars, and like in your head, and you're like, yeah, this is awesome. And then you find out like no one cares, I've said that many, many times. So that's really awesome to just hear you like reiterate those things and just keep that in perspective. Thank you for that. That's awesome.
Yeah, man.
Very cool. Very cool. Awesome, man. Well, that's about all I have. I think this was really, really helpful. This was something I anticipated talking about for a while. I think hopefully we did a good job of fleshing this out for anyone out there who's, thinking about starting something. I think exactly what you just said at the end here was really, really important. Is, even for me, like I'm going out, and I've been sharing this on the show recently, I'm starting my new thing using no code, kind of doing the things that I do for people and kind of living leading what I live. And and I also see that I need to develop thicker skin. And I think I have built something at some point that's like a little more complicated than it's going to be needed. But we can always, but again, it goes back to iterating fast and changing fast and things like that. So yeah, do you have anything else to add to our conversation or anything like that at all before we sign off?
The last thing I'll say is like, if you're listening to this and you heard Jesse and that stuff went over your head, or you're like, what the heck? Like, first off, know that there's someone like Dan who can be in your corner that can be the Jesse that you need, because most of what Jesse just shared, even though I've been in it with him for years, still I'm like, huh? Right. But if that doesn't interest you, this is great for people to hear. I like that we were able to cover both sides of this, because if you heard that and that doesn't interest you at all, then you hire someone like Dan, who's someone I personally trust. Like Dan is someone I would hire to do something like this. That's, like he's another Jesse. Or if you're like, this sounds so interesting, I want to dive in, then maybe take a stab at it. Maybe get some consulting with someone like Dan who knows their stuff, right? But at the end of the day, take action. You got both sides of the puzzle and both sides of the coin in one podcast interview, which I think is a very rare thing. So my thing that I tell people to do is to take action. Don't sit back and think and strategize. Jump, start moving forward and see which path you think would be better for you and the people that you're going to serve ultimately.
Amen, brother. I love it. That's good stuff. Very good stuff. Absolutely. So check it out. It's podmatch.com. Again, love the platform. Trust Alex implicitly with it. It's really, really cool. I share it on the show. I've done some, I know we haven't even talked about this, but I've actually done some ads for it and some plugs for it and all this different stuff. So you get a lot of free press on the show, man. But yeah, so check it out, guys. If you're a podcaster, even if you're a guest, you don't have to have a podcast to be on there. You can sign up as a guest and you can go on and share, like you said, like you can go and search for people who are in the healing space or in the business space or sales or whatever the heck that you're into. So highly, highly recommend it for you. I don't even think I could share our link here, which would obviously be awesome if you sign up and you upgrade to their thing. We'll put the affiliate link in there as well. But you don't even have to. I really don't even care about that. I just want people on there because it's really helped me grow this show. But it's also helped me get on other shows and share this, the expertise that I have and the experiences that I've had and stuff like that. So podmatch.com, my friends, check it out. Tell them Dan sent you and Alex will take good care of you. I promise. All right,
Thanks,
guys.
man. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Alex. All right. Appreciate you guys. Again, thank you very much for joining the show. Again, subscribe, like, share this podcast if you think it got value. We're going to be sharing the crap out of this. This should be really awesome. I think this is really cool, especially if you're someone or someone who's like thinking about diving into this world. Like, have them listen to this show. Like, this is super, super useful stuff and really worth a re-listen because, like, again, with everything we've covered, I think it'll be really awesome. So, very helpful stuff. All right. Thanks, Alex. Again, we appreciate you. Thank you all for joining, and we'll see you next time.